Hello, everyone. We are about to start chapter 3, and this is where things get to be really fun. So, we learned in chapter 2 what arguments are and what they consist of. We also learned what non arguments are and how they are different from arguments. An argument is simply one or more statements called premises that you use to make a point or a conclusion. So, this is the basic form of reasoning. Arguments sometimes don't follow the standard form of premise and conclusion or premises and conclusion. So, we have to pay attention to what we're reading, hearing, or seeing. And we saw that in the exercises that we did in that chapter. So, knowing this, we are now ready to learn more about what kinds of reasoning there are. All arguments are either deductive or inductive. Okay, so this chapter is all about outlining what these two are and what patterns there are of these two kinds of arguments. You may have heard that deductive argument goes from general to specific, and you hear this definition in like literature classes or communication classes, but this definition is not always helpful. The book defines it as an argument made to prove the conclusion that follows necessarily from the premises. So we want to focus on necessarily from the premises. So it has a lot to do with the structure of the argument. You may have also heard that inductive reasoning goes from specific to general. Again, it is not always helpful. Inductive arguments give conclusions that follow only probably from the premises. So the distinction between deductive and inductive arguments is that of necessity versus probability of conclusions. The necessity of deductive arguments also leads it to be valid or invalid. Yeah, so premises necessarily lead to the conclusion. A deductive argument is valid if the conclusions necessarily follow the premises we've said. Yeah, then obviously invalid arguments are the ones where the conclusion does not follow the premises. So here's an example of the conclusion that does not follow the premises. If we are at Cape Fear Community College, we are students. We're not at Cape Fear Community College, so we're not students. Okay, what is wrong with this argument? Yeah, so if we are then, right, then it's an if then hypothetical argument, right? And then the conclusion is not necessarily true. Why? Because you can be at Cape Fear Community College and a student, but just because you're not at Cape Fear Community College doesn't mean you are not a student. Okay, you can be somebody else. You can be at UNCW and be a student, or somewhere else and be a student, right? And Cape Fear and not be a student. So obviously it is wrong. This is an invalid deductive argument called denying the antecedent. So it follows if A, then B. Not A, so therefore not B, right? So the antecedent is we are at Cape Fear Community College, meaning it comes first. Okay, it is denied, as in we're not at Cape Fear Community College. Then the conclusion is also falsely denied as well in we are not students. So this is called denying the antecedent. At the same time, we also talk about whether or not a deductive argument is sound or unsound. Because deductive reasoning is based structurally on the conclusion. And I have to emphasize structurally here. Yeah, so structurally on the conclusion following the premises. Sometimes you run into premises that are questionable at best and downright bad or even false at worst, even if the argument is valid structurally, because premise conclusion follows. Okay. So let's say, here's an example. All dogs have pointy ears. Snoopy is a dog, so therefore Snoopy has pointy ears. Yeah, this is technically and structurally a valid argument because there's a premise and the conclusion necessarily follows from the premise. But it is a bad one. It's an unsound one. Why? Because the premise is false. For valid arguments to be sound, the premises have to be true. So, what is a good deductive argument? It is both valid and sound. Yeah, there are 5 counts of deductive arguments in the book, so pay attention to those. But it is very important for you to know where the faulty reasoning lies in deductive arguments. So now inductive arguments. Inductive arguments are strong or weak, yeah? Because we're dealing with probability, it's kind of hard to say true or false, yeah? So we talk about strong or weak because there is only strong probability or weak probability. Inductive arguments will typically generalize from premises or predict from premises. Yeah. So, like in surveys, for example, or use presumed authority, like an expert source, Shakespeare is a good writer because this expert says so. For example, to support a claim, use a cause or assert use a cause to assert or deny a claim, or it deploys statistics as evidence to a claim. So this is used a lot in politics, and as probabilities is not always necessarily true, but probability true. And probability, the way it works, sometimes it just doesn't happen. And inductive argument can also utilize comparisons or analogies to make a claim. Of all of these inductive reasoning, patterns of inductive reasoning, we probably use analogies all the time and most of the time. So how about this example from Forrest Gump? Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you are going to get. Yeah, so that's an inductive argument. I guess you are going to be looking at all kinds of phrases from now on with a different eye. So if an inductive argument is both strong and has all true premises, then it is called cogent. If it's not, then it is called appropriately uncogent. Yeah? So, got it? So keep things straight. So in order to get better at this, you need lots and lots of practice. So let's get ready to do the exercises. Bye.